Hello, and welcome to another NABBW Financial Podcast. Tonight, I'm with regular guest Pam Sams to discuss a very important December topic, tips for women on how to retire on your own terms. Year end is a natural time to revisit your finances and look ahead. It's a logical time to review your accounts and investments and get ready for the new year. And since we're so close to the end of the year that we can practically see it, it's a perfect time to review our retirement planning efforts to make sure we're still on track toward our financial goals, or set a corrective course if we are not. As Pam and I have discussed here quite often, many American women face an uphill battle when it comes to retirement. That's because while we women statistically live longer than men in retirement, we amass less in retirement savings because we earn less over the course of our careers and are far more likely to have interrupted our careers in favor of our family responsibilities. Not to mention that we tend to invest more conservatively than men. And then there's that ever so frustrating gender pay gap, which means that on average, we have less to contribute toward our retirement savings, resulting in lower lifetime savings to cover long-term living expenses. As a result, more women are at risk of falling into or near poverty compared to men. Women are 80% more likely than men to be impoverished when they reach 65 or older, according to a 2016 report from the National Institute on Retirement Security. I couldn't find a closer date on that, Pam, so maybe that has changed. You could let us know. And then the rest of the report said about 9% of women aged 65 or older lived at or below the federal poverty level at that time, compared to 5% of men. And now comes the icing on the cake. We US-based boomers are fast approaching something that's been dubbed peak 65. Never heard of it? I hadn't either, but it simply means that historically, the greatest surge in Americans turning 65 is coming in 2024. So if you haven't done anything yet, now is almost your last effort to prepare. Markets were dynamic throughout this year, driven by a robust recovery from pandemic-driven lows of 2020. Prices and inflation expectations also rose in step with the buzzing economy, but there's been some uncertainty swirling around potential tax law changes. And now I worry that with the rapid onset of the Omega COVID variant during this last quarter, that our recovery trend is going to be hampered going into 2022. I'm not a financial expert, Pam is, so you can tell us about that too, Pam. So I guess, Pam, I'm here just trying to say that you are very timely in suggesting tonight's topic, because who doesn't want to be able to say that she was able to retire on her own terms? Mm-hmm. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself here, audience. Before we dive into Pam's retirement planning tips, let me properly introduce this call. I'm Ann Holmes, your moderator and the boomer-in-chief of the National Association of Baby Boomer Women, an organization dedicated to educating and empowering women at midlife and beyond. And with me to help us make the best possible retirement planning decisions is Pamela J. Sams, BFA, CRPC, MBA, and trusted advisor to professional women. Pam is a chartered retirement planning counselor and NABBW's retirement planning associate. An expert in personal finance, Pam is president of Jackson Sams Wealth Strategies in Herndon, Virginia, and a monthly guest who covers important information related to money and financial planning. Welcome, everybody, to our Zoom call. And before we can begin, I need to play a little bit of a disclaimer here.
Securities offered through Securities America Incorporated, a registered broker-dealer, member FINRA SIPC. Advisory services offered through Securities America Advisors Incorporated, a SEC registered investment advisory firm. Pamela Sams, investment advisor representative. Jackson Sams Wealth Strategies, Securities America Incorporated, and all other entities named are separate entities.
Thanks for joining us again, Pam, especially because even as we find ourselves pulled toward the typical year-end holiday festivities, it's still hugely important for us to continue to make plans for our retirement.
Exactly. I know here we are on the precipice of a holiday coming up, but I really wanted to make sure we had our last call of 2021.
Isn't that amazing?
It's amazing. And I had wrote to you earlier is that I think next year we'll be going on year 11 of doing this. So I believe we're doing something right.
Right.
With people keeping coming back to
Mm.
learn more about personal finance, especially as it relates to boomer women as well. But as you was reading that, Anne, is really put me in the mindset of what I have been seeing all year is really women stepping up to really handle their personal finances, especially as it relates to retirement. So I probably was had more women coming to me this year, really concerned about how am I going to retire, like you said, on my own terms. How is this all going to play out for me? So I really wanted to talk about retirement tips and retirement income strategies. Maybe people can hear this call. I know people are holidaying and
Mhm.
eggnog and cookies and all of that, but if they take time to really listen, because that'll kind of put them into the that whole beginning of the year financial New Year's resolutions type mindset, to really start to think a little bit about what types of things I need to do in terms of retirement.
Excellent. And you have 10 points for us. So in order to make sure that we cover them all equally well, let's launch right into our discussion and begin with the discussion of retirement goals.
Exactly. But before I talk about goals, I just kind of want to emphasize some of the things that you had talked about in your intro. Is really some of the challenges that women have in terms of planning for their retirement. As you had stated before, men are going to live longer. I'm sorry, women are going to live longer than men. So longevity has become quite an issue. Living past, let's say age 65, he says peak
Mhm.
65, is that we need to plan for a 25 plus year retirement. And as it compared to men, not to say anything bad against guys,
Right.
but
No.
we need to make sure we have the resources available to us, because we're going to live much longer than men. And then the other issue you had mentioned as well is that wage gap.
Mhm.
And you probably mentioned it before. Of course, we have some time out of the workplace, but we are still earning less than men. 72 cents on a dollar from what men are earning. And so that puts us behind the curve as it relates to putting money into our 401ks if we are making less money. So that has also been a challenge for women. And of course, like I was mentioning before, it's just participation also in household finances. Sometimes we as women, boomer women, tend to not handle the household finances sometimes if we have a partner that's kind of good at it. So we
Mhm.
don't become involved with that. So we really don't know what that looks like. And especially this year, I have taken on quite a few clients that are have transitioned into becoming divorced after years. We had mentioned in several phone calls before a great divorce. So women who have been long married 30
Mhm.
plus years, and then
Right.
all of a sudden they're divorced and or widowed at that point.
Mhm.
But if they had no participation in the household finances, maybe a little bit behind the curve on figuring out retirement planning on their own as well. Which leads kind of to that question you just asked me, is retirement goals. So, even if you're married, you're single by choice, you're divorced and or widowed, what do you want, from your retirement? What are your retirement goals? Is it going to be 65? Am I going to work a little bit longer? With a lot of people with fairly comfortable jobs, what I'm getting now, or what I'm hearing from women, is that at least I can retire on my own terms. It doesn't have to be that traditional 65. It
Mhm.
could be 67, it could be 70, it could be 75. Especially, you and I, and we're business owners in our own right. A lot of women are entrepreneurs and business owners, so they could, will work and actually in perpetuity if they wanted to continue to
Sure.
work. This doesn't really have to have a retirement, or maybe cut back on a traditional work schedule, maybe work part-time, or having that choice where you work less and not
Mhm.
doing a full-time thing. But those are some of the things you need to think about in terms of kind of planning for your retirement, or what are your goals? When do you want to retire? Where do you want to live? Do you want to stay? We have several conversations before, and about, do we want to age in place, or do we want
Mhm.
to downsize and move to someplace else? So figuring out what do you want in terms of retirement all starts with, what are your actual retirement goals? where you want, when you want to retire, and then where you want to retire, and then what type of things you want to be doing in retirement as well. Do you want to continue to work? Maybe
Hmm.
start a second act, because a lot of women that I see as well had longer term careers, but now maybe want to start a business on their own, or um, have hobbies that they want to explore a little bit more than when they had to work a 40-hour week.
Hmm.
So all of that comes into planning what your retirement goals are going to look like.
Absolutely. I can't speak a lot about my mother's retirement goals because she didn't work outside of the home
Mhm.
except for maybe 5 or 10 years when all of us kids were in school. But
Yeah.
beyond that, she um, reverted back to being a woman who
Hmm.
enjoyed life and didn't work outside of the home. But if I look at my father, um, he's 91, he's an
Hmm.
engineer, and he said to us last summer that he thinks that he will not renew his engineering licenses this year. So,
Mm.
so
Okay.
apparently
At
at
92, yeah.
91, at 91, he thinks, okay, maybe I don't have to keep working. And he has also had goals that he wants to be able to travel somewhere that he wants to go every year. So it's not like
Hmm.
he's got his nose to the grindstone working all the time, but
Right.
he has left me with the impression that I would be very bored if I don't still have an oar in a little bit of work, even after the traditional retirement age. So I think a lot of people are finding themselves not wanting to just retire from the concept of leave the workplace and
Hmm.
find yourself with nothing to do. I think if you find
Exactly.
yourself with nothing to do, that leads to deterioration of your brain, I think.
Yeah, and I think you really do have to plan, not I mean, of course, the money piece is really important. That's, yeah, that's kind of first and foremost, but also those retirement goals. What are you actually going to be doing in retirement?
Mhm.
I know, several clients, and it's actually my family as well, took her a little bit early retirement from government, stayed retired maybe about 2 or 3 years, and then was like, what else is there to do in life?
Mhm.
And end up going back to work, part time.
Right.
But you have to fill in that, because now you have 24/7.
Mhm.
Before you worked the 40, you got up, you did 8 hours perhaps at a job, you came home, you did that. And of course, it becomes repetitious. But now you have basically 24/7. You wake
Mhm.
up or you get up in the morning, and then you don't have anywhere to go. How are you filling your time? What are you doing?
Mhm.
Like you said, really exercising, making sure you exercise, of course, physically, but also your brain, because if you're going to just binge watch stuff all the time, or do mundane tasks, that you're really
Mhm.
not engaging yourself in something that's a little bit more meaningful. Sometimes that gets old quickly
Mhm. Right.
when it comes to retirement, especially if, like I said, if you're planning a 25 plus year retirement. That's 25 years of what do I want to fill my time with,
Mhm.
for that. And so that is just as important on how much, planning what you want to do, or when I want to retire, and but also looking at what do you want to do in retirement as well.
Mhm. Yes, I think that's imperative to have a plan. I've
Mhm.
think I've mentioned on this call with you
Mhm.
over the years that when I go to the gym and I see some of these recently retired people, especially men that I speak with at the gym, they
Mhm.
they say, "Oh, I'm retired. I'm so excited. I've got nothing to do." And I keep thinking, and how long is that
Yeah.
going to be a happy thing for you?
Yeah, how long is that going to be a happy thing? Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Maybe 12 months after that
Hmm.
first year, and then you're like,
Right.
what am I actually going to be doing?
There
It's
has to
only
be
so
something
much
more,
time.
right?
Yeah, only so much time I can spend in the gym.
Right. All right. So is there more that we should talk about in retirement goals, or should we switch on to point number two, which
Yeah.
is retirement needs?
Yes, exactly. So after you figured out what do you want to do, what your goals are, when you want to retire, where you want to live, what are you going to be doing, is how much you're actually going to need. And that's one of the questions that I get all the time is people come to me is that I want to retire, but I have no idea how much I'm actually going to need. And then I start with point one, as I explained before, what do you want to do? So we need to know what do you want to do in order to fill out how much money you're going to actually need in retirement. So you want to travel? Do you want to get a second home? Do you want to, downsize? Do you want to upgrade? Maybe
Mhm.
sometimes people get a larger home to maybe make a generational home for grandkids and children
Mhm.
and whoever. So what do you want to see happen in terms of what we just talked about with goals? Then we put a number to it to figure out how much you want to, how much you're going to need in order to uh, sustain the lifestyle that you want in retirement. And what I go over is a couple of different phases of retirement. And I believe we had talked a little bit about this in a previous phone call, is that when you think about your retirement need or your retirement income, retirement is kind of broken up into three phases. One is the go-go years. So the first part of your retirement, it be it 65 or 67 or whenever that is, you're going to want to get a lot of stuff out of your system. So you're going to be
Mhm.
doing a lot more things, traveling, hobbies, whatever the case may be. So in the first part of that or that first phase, you actually may need a little bit more because now you're doing a bunch of things that you hadn't
Mhm.
done when you were actually working. Then you have phase two, which is basically the slow go years. And then at that point, you're slowed down, you got a lot out of your system, you did the travel, you did all of that. So maybe your income or your expenses will level out a little bit. And then you have the third phase of retirement, which is basically the no-go years. That's basically the end part of you're aging,
Mhm.
you're not doing a lot of things, you're staying at home, you're not doing it. But on that side of in that phase, you can actually have increased costs with long-term care, healthcare costs, refitting homes for things that you need to, maybe the little stair thing to get you up the steps
Mhm.
and walkers and refitting your home. So you can actually end up spending more in those no-go years, just like those go-go years in the beginning when you were doing a lot of things. So when you think about your actual needs, you need to figure out, you know, how much I'm going to need to live off of. We had talked a little bit about in the beginning of your conversation, and it's about, now we're going through a fairly hefty inflationary period of time. So we need to figure out how much our dollar is going to be worth in the future. So you have to kind of do what we call a time value of money
Mhm.
calculation when I do with my clients is that what's the dollar going to be like 25 years from now, 30 years from now, 40 years from now, and then figure that out. So it's roughly inflation. It's a little bit higher this year, but it runs generally somewhere between 2 to 3%. So that's what I use in retirement analysis to figure out, how much money is going to be worth in the future for you. But once you kind of figure out what are you going to need, what are you going to be doing, where you're going to live, those kind of go-go years, and then on the back end with the no-go years being increased healthcare costs, then you can come up with a number of how much you're actually going to need to sustain the lifestyle that you want in retirement. So you don't end up falling victim to what you explained before in the beginning of the call, is living in a poverty situation because you maybe not planned accordingly on how much you actually would need, and maybe invested a little bit more conservative, that you didn't outpace inflation and now you're working a little bit behind the curve because your dollar is not going as far as it had in the beginning of your retirement. So
Mhm.
those are some things to think about when you think about what are you actually going to need in retirement.
All right. Very important, that discussion. And thank you for making it so clear with the go-go and the no-go. And I've not heard that before, but it really is a fun way to keep
Mhm.
awareness of the three phases.
Yeah,
So thank you for
exactly.
that.
Mhm.
Now, point number three is something that you alluded to is when you
Mhm.
figure out what you want, then you have to make the budget for how you're going to do that. So I know we talk
Yes.
about budget all the time, And I know we have to talk about budgets all
We
the
have to
time,
talk about budget all
but
the time. I know.
so
Whenever I put that on the list, I know you probably look at it and go, "Is Pat talking about budget again?" Yes, I always talk about budget because it always comes back to that. And all of the conversations that we have is that it really depends on how much money you're going to need, but
Mhm,
what are you going to be spending? So a lot of times, especially now, things are costing more, so it's kind of hard to gauge what your expenses may look like, of course, 25 plus years into the future, let alone tomorrow. So a lot
mhm,
of people don't have, they have a basic understanding of the inflows and outflows of their home, but in terms of kind of putting parameters or boundaries on certain categories, that's where people have challenges with is that they may be overspending on eating out, or they
mhm.
may be overspending on certain categories. I have a lot of clients who, Amazon is a blessing and a curse sometimes.
Oh, yes.
Is that people end up buying stuff that you probably would never, it pops up in your inbox and oh, I need that. You don't need it. So really looking at curbing some of the costs that may be getting a little bit out of hand from your budget. But it
Mhm,
all comes down to kind of the inflows and outflows, as I explained before. So what are you spending money on? Of course, the building blocks of I always kind of take it back to the Maslow's hierarchy of need. You need food,
mhm,
shelter, transportation generally. So those are the big building blocks. What are you spending on? Where are you going to live? So mortgage or perhaps rent. What are you going to spend for food? All of the necessities part. And then
mhm,
you think about kind of the wants. So I always go through an analysis, kind of the needs wants analysis with clients. Is that what do you need to, that basic building block foundation I talked about, food, shelter, probably how to get around, and then all of the other things are wants. I want, a new car, I want a vacation home, I want all of those things, and then translate it into actually how much you're going to need to sustain either a car note or a mortgage and all of those, and put parameters around certain categories that you may be overspending on in the wants category. And then that's when you come up with, kind of taking it back to that previous question, is that once you understand how much you're spending money on or your expenses, that will determine how much you're actually going to need. So going into retirement, you really need to have a good understanding of how much money you're going to have coming in, but also how much money you're spending on things,
mhm,
because you're on a fixed income basically.
mhm.
And so you need to make sure, because you're not getting a paycheck every 2 weeks, you need to devise your own paycheck in retirement, taking money from investments or Social Security or whatever the case may be, is only going to last so long. So you want to make sure you have those parameters set with your expenses so you don't, um, number one, fall victim to inflation, but then also not overspending. Because we had talked about those three phases, is that if you spend a lot in the beginning with those go-go years, you may not have as much on the back end for those no-go years,
Mhm.
or somewhere in between. And then that's where a lot of times women, especially because we have longevity is one of those challenges, is that we need to plan accordingly so we won't fall victim, like I said before, into that poverty situation because we've overspent in the beginning or really didn't plan for a longer term retirement, like we should think about,
Mhm.
because my mother just turned 91 a couple of weeks ago. So that's when she retired. She was similar to your mom, Ann, is that she had jobs outside the home, in and out. So she was a
Mhm.
stay-at-home mom sometimes, and then she would get a piece of a job, and she would do that. But basically officially kind of retired in that 65. So now we're almost 30 years in, uh, really making sure she has enough resources to sustain her lifestyle. So
Mhm.
that's what you have to think about, ladies, is what is it going to look like if I live into my 90s, 95, 100? There's so many centenarians that are out there now. We need to plan accordingly, and it all starts with your budget and your expenses.
All right. Well, point four on your list is make a plan. So I think what
Mhm.
you're talking about in the beginning here with budget is planning, but let's
Uh-huh.
hear more about the how you make a plan that I'm assuming you have to account for those inflationary every year. Inflation is gonna add 2 to 3% more at least.
Yeah, exactly. And then really just kind of developing, an overall financial plan, because
Mhm.
your life is going to be ever fluid on different changes. You stop working, you may go back part-time, you may downsize, you may do certain things. So you want to take a look at making a game plan on all of those different scenarios, on what could happen in those particular situations. So you want to make sure you're confident on how much you're going to need, what your expenses look like, and then really making kind of projecting out the details of what
Mhm.
that can look like. So it all starts with putting a plan in place so you feel confident that it's going to basically all work out. With anything, is that even with planning a vacation, you plan a vacation, you buy the tickets, but what kind of activities you're going to be doing in the on the vacation. So it's the same thing with planning
Mhm.
with your retirement. Is that okay? Here I am, 65. I want to retire now. What type of things I'm going to be doing? What kind of activities? What am I going to need money for? It's the same type of planning that you would be doing with any particular event, from point A to point B. Give you, like I said, a little bit of a framework to work within, so where you're going.
Mhm.
Basically, we all have GPS now on our phones and
Right.
on our cars, and if we want to get somewhere, we just type it in, and it's
Mhm.
like, okay, this is how you get there. Same thing with your retirement plan. It's like, I want to retire, GPS, how am I going to get there? It all starts with your financial plan and putting those things in place. So thinking about healthcare costs, thinking about what your basic living expense is going to be. Think about what the tax structure may look like. We're in a low interest rate tax environment now, but we have a lot of things coming down the pike in terms of legislation that could increase taxes sometime in the future. So you have to plan accordingly for that, to make sure that you don't end up owing more in taxes or paying more out of pocket for that, and you didn't account for it in your plan. So making a plan gives you that framework, gives you that structure, gives you something to kind of that roadmap, that GPS to work on, to make you feel a little bit more confident that all of the numbers, of course, the other variables could change, but it at least give you that basic framework, to know what direction you're going for
Mhm.
retirement.
One one thing that I think about is because I have a mortgage. Some
Mhm.
people, by the time we retire, we have paid off the home and we don't
Yeah.
have a mortgage. But
Mhm.
I probably have 20 years left on my mortgage. And the thing
Mhm.
about the mortgages, I'm kind of okay with it because it's a static number.
Yeah, exactly.
Unless I choose to refinance at a time when it could make it go lower,
Mhm.
which many people have been done in the past year or so because mortgage rates have gotten so low. But
Exactly.
in just out of curiosity, is paying off the mortgage early a thing that you would ever recommend, or since there's always a cost to living in a
Mhm.
home, should you just figure that's a static figure that's going to stay the same?
Yeah, it really just kind of depends, because some people don't like debt and they don't
Hmm.
want to have it there. If you, like you said, you use it as a static number and you put it into your budget or your expenses, then you just account for it,
Hmm.
for that. Because on the other side, as long as the mortgage interest deduction is there,
Hmm.
that gives you a little bit of a tax break as well. With that, with having a mortgage, if you don't have a mortgage, then you may have to find some other ways to lower your tax liabilities,
Hmm.
for that as well. But it just kind of depends on how people feel about having a mortgage in
Hmm.
retirement. Some people like to have it paid off. And then some people just put it as a static number, like you said before. What I don't recommend is going into retirement with consumer debt,
Hmm.
because that's
Right.
just going to take away from the resources that you have available for retirement income.
Hmm. Right.
If you're servicing debt and you're spending, five, 600 $100,000 on that, that's money that can be used for your lifestyle living versus paying on a credit card. So I do recommend not going into to retirement with saddled with consumer debt if you
Mhm.
can. I mean, if you have a
Right.
little bit, it's a little bit,
Mhm.
but try not to go in with a lot of consumer debt because it's just going to take away from your retirement resources.
All right. Well, that makes sense. I totally understand the difference between
Mhm.
consumer debt and
Yeah,
in housing costs.
exactly. Yes.
Right. All right. Point number 5 on your list is know your retirement income sources.
Yes. So this is the time period where you start when you're planning for retirement, is that you need to know where money's going to come from, because this is
Mhm.
where your retirement, how your retirement paycheck, you're not going to get the regular paycheck that you get every 2 weeks. You need to start figuring out what's going to be coming into your house for income. So you're taking inventory. So you're looking at Social Security, you're looking at if a pension is available, you're looking at your 401k or 403b. You could have rental income. Whatever is going to produce income for you is where you need to start taking note and putting those down. Or if you're working with a financial advisor or professional, start disclosing a lot of that. What I've learned over time is that some people end up with a job. They could have been there for some significant period of time. There may be a pension available that you weren't even aware of. So I
Mhm.
always go back with people and say, did you work at a job longer than 5, maybe 10 years? You may have a pension available. So you need to start hunting and getting about understanding where your income sources. So if that's the case, there is a way to research if you had a pension available to you. Or contact the old employer to say, was there a pension available during the time period that you worked? And then that would be one of the sources of income that you would have in retirement. So
Mhm.
really taking inventory of where the how your retirement paycheck is going to end up. I always kind of reference a three-legged stool when you think about retirement income. One would be Social Security, two would be pension, the third one would be outside investments like your 401k or 403b. A lot of people now don't have that second leg, which is pensions. A lot of pensions do not exist anymore and are being reduced or
Mhm.
eliminated. There's so many things that are going on with state pensions that people had relied on for years that may be reduced or going away. Um, so you need to know, or some employers don't even offer it anymore when they change from a defined benefit plan, which are pensions, to a defined contribution plan, which is your 401k, 403b, TSP if you're government workers. So a lot of the pensions went away with that,
Mhm.
leaving people only with two-legged stool, and we know how a
Mhm.
two-legged stool works.
Right. Yes.
If you're on it, you're going to be lopsided, you're going to be tilted without that third leg.
Right.
So are there ways that you could put in a third leg? Maybe some fixed income structure, maybe like an annuity or something that could basically some type of fixed income structure. Uh, Statistically, or kind of a general rule, you want to have at least 50% of your retirement income coming from fixed income resources, like a Social Security, like an annuity, like a pension, because then that way it's going to be there. It's fairly reliable. It's fairly, I wouldn't say guaranteed, but it's reliable. You're going to get it.
Mhm.
And then the other part, the other 50% will come from variable sources like a 401k or 403b or TSP for government workers. Then
Mhm.
that way, if the stock market did something wacky, you don't have to rely too much on that because you're only going to be taking half of that from the variable sources versus knowing that you have fixed income sources that'll cover your basic needs, the food, the shelter, the transportation from fixed income sources, and then the other wants would be handled through the variable sources like your investments
Mhm.
for that. But when you start taking inventory of where your money, how you're going to devise your retirement paycheck, then that's where you want to start kind of doing I call it kind of hunting gathering, is that you
Mhm.
have investment accounts. What are you going to get for Social Security? The Social Security Administration stopped kind of sending out these. green and white statements. They really are sending you to the website ssa.gov is where you would get your Social Security statement and know what you're going to get at those three ages. Basically, age 62 is the earliest you can get Social Security. Your full retirement age, depending on when you were born, that could be anywhere between 65 to 67. So you have to know that number. And then you have delayed credits, which is at age 70. So those are three numbers that you'll find on your Social Security statement. So depending on when you want to retire, you would look at what that number is, and then that would be part of your retirement income. And then if you get a pension, that would be part of the other part of your retirement income to make up your paycheck. And then basically what your investments are worth and how much you need to take out of that. So this is the time as you start planning, generally probably 10 years, if you're within 5 to 10 years of retirement, this is where the hunting and gathering stage comes into. What are you going to have in terms of inventory for resources for retirement income, and getting the numbers and understanding what those numbers look like and how they may inflate over time, or their inflation protection, or in a pension. How much is my pension going to inflate out on an annual basis? If you have military pension, you have government pension, any of the corporate pensions, is it going to be worth the same later on, or what percentage increase do I get annually or every 2 years or whatever? So understanding the program as well is where you want to start looking at when you start taking inventory.
Excellent. And then point number 6 is evaluate investment risk. Now, that's an interesting topic for me right now. Since my mother recently died, we kids are going to be getting some funds as a result of her will. And my brother was telling me that he was going to he was going to be making 10%. And I'm going, where in the heck are you going to get 10% right now?
Exactly. I'm like, I don't know. Maybe your brother knows something.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, is he talking to some pie in the sky person? Because I have not seen anything that I think is going to
hopefully
come up with 10% right now.
Hopefully he's not into crypto and kind of
I
betting
don't
on
know.
that
He does have an MBA, so you'd think he's fairly knowledgeable, but
he could have that. But 10 is historically, if you look at the stock market, it has produced 8 to 10%, but that's over a certain period of time, probably not on an annual basis for that. So if he's a long-term investor, perhaps. But back to the beginning of our conversation is that you had explained that we had talked about women being more conservative investors, and that's where evaluating your investment risk comes from. Is that we tend to be longer term investors, and actually statistically they say women are better investors. We just happen to be more conservative because we don't want to lose money. But this is the time where you're thinking about your retirement. Is that, are you taking on enough risk in order to meet your goals? I talked a little bit about inflation before. If we invest as women too conservatively, then we have erosion of our buying power because we're now outpacing inflation. So if inflation is 3% and we're very conservative and we're only getting 2%, you see where the difference is, the dichotomy on that. Is that eventually we're not going to keep up and it'll be erosion of our buying power, and then we would end up with less money. So evaluating what we call the modern portfolio theory, which is how can I take on enough risk to meet my goals, but enough risk to reach my goal with making a decent rate of return. So in areas what they call an efficient frontier. I don't want to get too techie on you, but the efficient frontier is kind of that. How can I optimize my rate of return and take on a less risk? And there's kind of an efficient way to do that. So you want to look at what your risk tolerance is. If you're working with a professional, they generally go through a questionnaire for you, but then also kind of taking a temperature of how My motto is helping women sleep well at night. I want to make
Mhm.
sure you're also able to sleep well at night,
Right. Yes.
that you're not going to be up worried about, the stock market fell 500 points today or something like
Hmm.
that, because you took on too much risk. So you want to make sure that you evaluate it. If you're working with a professional, having an efficient way to make the rates of return you need to meet your retirement goals, but not taking on too much risk as well. But we do have to move up the needle, ladies, in terms of being very conservative, because you're just not going to outpace inflation if you do. But it's a way to strategically try to figure out the best way to get a decent rate of return to make your goals with taking on less risk through, kind of like I said, some certain asset allocation models that operate on an efficient frontier.
All right. Well, thanks for clarifying that, because as I said, it's a topic in households that I hung out with for
Yeah.
Christmas. So.
Exactly. Yeah. And you had mentioned before about, inherited money, since we're here towards the beginning of the year, end of the year, is that inherited IRAs, now that you have it now, before, I think it
Mhm.
was before 2020, if you had an inherited IRA, you needed to take a required minimum distribution before the end of the year. Now, inherited IRAs after 2020, it falls into what they call a 10-year, 10 and done. Basically,
Mhm.
you have to start taking distributions out of it, and it needs to be depleted within a 10-year window for any inherited IRA. So anybody who's listening and you in that situation, is that start taking the required minimum distributions accordingly. You don't want to end up in a situation that 10 years you still have money in it, and then the IRS doesn't like that, and you can get a nasty surprise. So you don't want
Mhm.
that.
Right. Exactly. I actually, Pam, over the Christmas holiday with my family, I got to say RMD and know what I was talking about.
Yes. And people were like, "What is that?" And you're
Yeah,
like,
right,
"Yes, I've been on enough calls over the past 10 years with
right.
Pam to know what that is."
Yes. Yes. Whoever was speaking did not use the proper, they didn't use the term, they just made an allusion to it. And I said, "Oh, you mean an RMD?" And they said, "Yeah."
Yes, that's
So,
what that is.
right. So thank you for making me look smart.
Yes.
All right. Correlating to evaluating your investment risk, point number 7 is don't leave money on the table.
Yes. So, for people who are continuing to be investors through their employer, there's money on the table. So making sure you at least get the match. So if you're putting in money into a 401k, 403b, TSP for government workers, you want to make sure that you're at least putting in as much as the employer is putting in to get the match. So that's money on the table that you can have as well. You also have provision for the catch up. So if you're maximizing your 401k, your 403b, or any other programs, then if you're over age 50, you can also put in what we call a catch up contribution. So that's more money that you could put into your investments as well. And then also the Social Security Administration, a lot of people don't think about Social Security and maximizing benefits, but I think I mentioned in a phone call several years ago that we've done on Social Security, is that there are a lot of different ways to take or claim Social Security. It's not just contact the Social Security Administration, say, "Hey, I want my check." There's a lot of strategies involved. How do I maximize my
Mhm.
benefit? They've taken some things out of the tool chest. There was a delay. You can file a suspend. You can do a lot of things that went away. But there's ways to maximize. I mentioned age 70 is the delay credit. So each year that you don't file a claim or you hold on to it about past your full retirement age, it actually accumulates 8% up until age 70, and that's the latest that you can take Social Security benefits. But let's say you take benefits or your full retirement age is 66, you can get 8% a year up until age 70. So that's money
Mhm.
on the table as well that you can have. Also for women who are divorced, and what I think people miss a lot of times, because sometimes it's not right away that you don't
Mhm.
think about it. You could be divorced, 20 years ago or 30 years ago. Is that if you've been married for at least 10 years to your spouse, your ex-spouse, your age 62, you also could get what they call a spousal Social Security benefit. So you can
Mhm.
match records. So if your ex-spouse made much more than you did, perhaps your half of what their benefit would be could be a little bit better than your own benefit. So that's money that it may be left on the table, and it doesn't affect their benefit at all. This is something that Social Security provides for as a spousal benefit amount. So if
Mhm.
you are in that category, ladies, you're age 62, you have been married for at least 10 years to your ex-spouse, you haven't gotten remarried, that is the caveat, is
Mhm.
that you can be remarried, is that to call the Social Security Administration to see if you're at that stage where I want to retire. You're doing the inventory of your retirement income benefits to make up your retirement paycheck. Is that you look at your record, perhaps your record for Social Security, because you've been out of the workplace for a while, and that you have the credits, but you may not have made so much, and your ex-spouse may have made more. Like I said, perhaps their half, because the spousal benefit is basically half of their
Mhm.
benefit. So perhaps your half is actually greater than your own record on your own record. What Social Security Administration does, if you give them a call, say, I meet the criteria for spousal benefits, they will run the numbers for you and give you the higher of the two. So if your record is, let's say, 900, and the half from your spousal benefit is maybe 1,200, there you go. There's
Mhm.
money that could have been left on the table. And like I said, a lot of times divorced women miss this because their divorce was so long ago and out of their mind that they
Mhm.
didn't think about it. So I
Right.
always talk to my, because I deal with a lot of divorced women, is that I put it down in their file, is that okay, you've been married, you've meet the criteria. When you get to this stage, when we start planning for retirement income, we're going to revisit this to make sure that we take a look at it. Contact the Social Security Administration. They'll run the numbers for you, give you the higher of the two to make sure you're not leaving money on the table.
And that's really smart. Smart
Mhm.
use of something that you have every right to if you
Yeah,
qualify.
exactly, exactly. And the same with pension. If you're
Mhm.
divorced and you have access to part of your ex-spouse's pension benefits, there could be some money there as well. They'll Because it's kind of hard to do what they do, actuarial projection calculation of a pension, but there could be some monies there as well with pension income.
All right. Point number 8, you alluded to at the beginning of this discussion, and I was so glad to see it on your list, and that is
Yeah.
Plan for Long-Term Care, which is abbreviated as LTC.
Yeah, and that's one of those areas we it kind of comes up in all of our conversations, is because it's such a huge part of it. And you've experienced it, I've experienced it with my mom and and,
Mhm.
and, and your mom as well, is that at some point in our lives, ladies, we're going to be in a long-term care situation that we have to have either a nurse come in and take care of us, and or we're in a facility. I've shared with you several times that my mother is currently in an assisted living facility. How do you pay for these things? Unfortunately, my mom didn't have a whole lot of resources, and we end up having to qualify her for Medicaid. That's I would not wish Medicaid on my worst enemy.
Mhm.
You have to be almost destitute. They only allow you to have $2,000 worth of assets when you get into that situation, which is grueling, and you don't want to have to go through the application process because that's grueling. So if there's a way to basically offset that particular event to
Mhm.
a life insurance, I'm sorry, an insurance company that could be able to pay some of the expenses for you, that's where you want to fall into it. Now, what I get a lot, and is that, that I'm thinking about, what do I need for retirement? I'm raising my kids, I'm doing all this. How am I going to really afford to put away for long-term care? And I always say you can't really afford not to, because it's
Mhm.
inevitable, especially as women, we're going to live longer. at some point we're going to need care. We're going to be
Mhm.
unable to care for ourselves as well. So if you can do the best you can to see if you can put a policy in place sooner rather than later, that's where you want to plan for. And as I mentioned before, in kind of that third phase of retirement, the no-go years, that's where it all hits. Is that, now I have increased expenses, I have Medicare expenses, co-pays, I have to refit my house, I may have an assisted living or long-term care situation. Um, what I get a lot now as well is kind of that sandwich generation, is that I have clients who are thinking about these things for their parents because unfortunately our parents, and I'm sure yours as well, and that just wasn't one of the things that was talked about. I mean, it was
No,
like, it was automatically, I got kids, they're going to take care of me.
right.
And you don't plan for the money part of how that's going to happen. Now I need to either put you in and to get care for you, put you in a facility or have somebody take care of you, but that costs money. And
Mhm.
where is that going to come from? So if, as in your retirement plan, you want to think about these things, that back end of retirement, that phase three, which is the no-go years, the long-term care piece of it as well.
Mhm.
So if you could put some things in place to do that, and or, as I explained before, making a plan, what are you going to do in the event that this happened? Do I downsize? Do I sell my house? Do I do whatever? Do I do a reverse mortgage and pay for whatever? So, but
Mhm.
having some type of game plan to accommodate what may happen in the later part of your retirement, which is basically a long-term care situation, is where you need to focus in on.
Okay, excellent. And something that we really have to talk about and think about and plan
Yeah,
for.
yeah,
So point number 9, maximize income.
yeah. And that kind of goes hand in hand where I talked about social security part of it, pension, uh, you know, with higher income, the key is to save as much money now when you have the income.
Mhm.
So, are there raises or bonuses that you can get? If that's the case, then let's say if you can um, maximize that in order to put it away for the future. Basically, what I use the analogy putting dollars away on layaway for future events. So
Mhm.
if you have a higher earnings right now, save as much money as possible in your 401k or 403b or TSP for government workers, and or this is the time period where you would also get maximum Social Security benefits based on kind of the last 35 quarters of that. They shave off 5 years basically, and they just take those high income years for you. But that would be kind of the maximum income for that. Or perhaps if you're not making as much as you want, but you want to put more money away, and we had talked about, people doing side gigs these
Mhm.
days in order to make a little bit more money to put away for retirement. I have actually a couple of clients that, she's a little bit behind the curve when it comes to retirement savings. And so she's working at Amazon a few days a week or so and getting money there. And they actually do offer a few benefits as well. So she's getting some of that and she's able to put money away. And, that's kind of maximizing her income for retirement savings. So wherever you think you can get it, if you're a high income earner now, putting away any either increases in
Mhm.
income as you get them, bonus money, perhaps a side gig, maybe a part-time job, whatever you need to do to try to maximize your income during this phase where you're saving for retirement or planning for retirement is the key.
And point number 10 on your list is very important. Maybe it's possibly as important as any of the other ones. Even though it's only 2 words, and that is seek help.
Yeah, seek help at all costs if you can, because a lot of this, what I talked about before, is that women, we tend to, as women, shy away from the finances sometimes, that we're not as savvy as we want, or sometimes we're just so afraid of it that we don't deal with it. So if that's the case, you still need to get this done. ask for help. If there's CPAs out there, there's financial planners, there's a variety of different people that you can ask, but try to ask a professional, of course.
Mhm.
I always say that, retirement planning is not a do-it-yourself project. It's just not. It's so
Mhm.
many moving parts and variables now. This is not your grandparent, or it's not your grandfather's, your grandmother's retirement. It's not the gold watch where you stayed at a job for 30 years and you got the gold watch and you got the pension and then you were set.
Mhm.
This is a lot going on that we talked about, longevity. We talked about the wage gap. We talked about all of these retirement needs. All of the things that we talked about today have, like I said, so many levers that you can pull on how this all plays out for you for a successful 25 plus year retirement. So if you are kind of in over your head, seek help at all costs, really, to make sure that it's taken care of for you. The number one question I get all the time, Ann, is, am I going to have enough for retirement? I want to make sure I'm not going to run out of money. We as women, we go to the depths of our worst fears, which is becoming a bag lady,
Mhm.
regardless of if we're
Right.
making $10,000 or we're making $10 million. It's still the
Mhm.
same fear that
Right.
eventually we're going to run out of money. We're going to be a bag lady.
Mhm.
So if that's one of your things, work with a professional to make sure that they run the numbers for you, to give you that GPS, give you that roadmap to show you everything is going to be okay and that you can sleep well at night. That's where you really want to focus in on if you are. And it's just really this a partnership on finding the right person that could provide those some guidance for you as
Mhm.
well.
Excellent. I have a question regarding this
Yeah,
final point, seeking
yeah,
help. Um, and it's a little bit maybe unusual, but in preparing
yeah.
for this call, I ran across a New York Times article by uh, Joshua Brockman. I
Hmm.
don't never heard of him before, but that's the author. I need to give him credit.
Yeah,
It was published in April of 2020, and the article was titled "Women Are, quote, Claiming Their Power in Investment Clubs of Their Own."
yeah.
And the article gave an example of a woman in her 20s who finally started making headway on her finances when she started attending the Austin Women's investing group, which
Hmm.
she actually found on a meetup situation.
Yeah.
And after gaining her confidence with finances, and she was apparently a person making minimum wage, and she just
Uh-huh.
had in a minimum wage job, no way that she thought that she could possibly
Yeah.
save any money. But after gaining some confidence with this group, she went on to create an investment app that takes the form of a stock market simulation game designed to help young adults learn to invest. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. You probably have. I had not. It's called
Hmm.
Signum City, City, like.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think I've heard of that. I've heard of a few apps for younger investors, young
Mhm.
women, like you said, are really taking their power when it comes to their finances, and either, kind of collabing with their girlfriends and getting together in investment clubs that you mentioned
Right.
before, or meetups. That's what a lot of people do as well, really as a collaborative to learn
Mhm.
more about how to be more empowered with their finances. What I'm seeing now, Ann, is that, we talk, of course, our conversation is all about boomer women, but a lot of the younger women I'm seeing that probably grew up in a situation where I don't want to be relying on long-term employment, because a lot of them just are not going to be at a job longer than
Mhm.
let's say 5 years these days. So they don't want to rely on that, but they also want to make sure they're knowledgeable as well, and is when it comes to their money.
Mhm.
More so than I think our generation was, and is that we just kind of went with the flow, and it happened, whatever happened happened. But
Mhm.
now I think a lot of younger women, millennials and Gen Zs, and those are taking back their power when it comes to learning more about it and saying, this doesn't have to be my narrative. I can
Mhm.
learn how to do this. I could, develop an app. I can start a group with a group of girlfriends in order to we work as a collaborative and learning together on that. So yeah, I think that's kind of where that generation. I think I mentioned before in a couple of calls is that my youngest client actually right now is about 24, right, basically right out of college, making really good money. I want to do better than, not to say that her mom was doing any worse,
Mhm.
but I don't want to have that scenario. I want to make sure that I'm doing the smart things with the money that I'm making now. Like I said, maximizing income and making sure they're making smart choices with the money that they have. So I think the younger generation is definitely kind of moving it forward when it comes to uh, retiring on their own terms as
Mhm.
well.
The article also talked about a survey conducted by PIMCO, PIMCO.
Yeah,
I was not familiar with them, but this
yeah,
survey found that when it comes to retirement, 72% of all women and 81% of millennial women said the investing system is, quote, set up to be confusing. So
yeah.
I thought that was fascinating because I've always thought that it was confusing, but I thought it was just me.
No, no, that's the unfortunate piece. And PIMCO is an investment firm, primarily more bond investing. They're more conservative income type of investment company for PIMCO. They have some, but that's kind of their base is where they focus in on. But I get that a lot as well. Is that it's like learning a different language
Mhm.
when you're dealing with investing, and it's so confusing when it comes to that. That a lot of that's why a lot of women, especially and men as well, tend to stay away from things that confuse the heck out of us.
Right.
And investing happens to be one of those.
Mhm.
We start a job with our 401k. You get a package, and HR sends it to you, tell you to go to the investment company or provider. They'll give you, the spiel on this is how it works, but then nobody really kind of explains to you, what's large cap and how is this done and all of that, and
Mhm.
this is just so confusing as well. That's why I like giving, to doing these webinars with you to really educate women on these different areas, because it's all about education and learning and making it more simple and not all of the second language that's really confusing for women.
Exactly. That's one of the next thing I was going to say is I know that your focus has always been on helping women with their finances,
Hmm.
which you and I both believe is hugely important. But
Yeah.
this article said that traditionally the financial service industry has been not only very confusing, but it noted that major financial institutions like Bank of America,
Mhm.
Merrill Lynch, UBS, and Fidelity are starting to take note of the estimated, you know this number, but I had not heard
Mhm.
this, the estimated $22 trillion in personal wealth that women in the United States
Mhm.
control. Trillion,
Trillion, yeah, trillion with the T.
right?
Yeah, and that's why, over the past, several years, you've heard, the DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, has been big, of course, with minorities, but also women and all of that for a lot of these bigger investment firms, because we are inheriting and controlling a lot more resources than we had. So they're taking notice, let's say
Mhm.
that,
Right.
to make sure that we are investing with their firms. It is in their best interest as well to make sure they're educated so they know they get a little bit of that trillion.
Mhm.
So, there's a lot of, I work with a lot of vendors as well in those investment firms. And they have a lot of good programs that are really geared towards women in investing as well. I've used a lot of kind of the material when I introduce to other seminars or workshops and things like that to use, because they are doing better, let's say, when it comes to introducing and making women a lot more comfortable in terms of investing.
Well, I know that you have given yourself uh, the name of trusted advisor
Yeah.
to professional women.
Uh-huh.
And I think that that is just so excellent because women, whether they're professionals or if they're the
Mhm.
people making minimum wage, we need someone to trust. We don't necessarily feel that if we go in and talk to any old stockbroker, that we're going to not have some pat us on the shoulder and say, there, let me help you. And you
Yeah.
wouldn't necessarily feel trusting about what they're doing. So,
Yeah, exactly. And I've been doing, in this profession for actually January of 2022 will be 20 years that I've been doing this. That's what you get a lot. You kind of get the male perspective of the financial world, and sometimes we as women are being talked down to, or we're not being addressed accordingly, or like you said, that they're there, or don't. What I get all the time, or what I've heard before, don't sweat your pretty head about it. It'll be
right,
okay, and I'll make
right,
the decisions
right.
on that. You don't need to know all of this, and that's not where we want to be as women. We want somebody that we can trust, a trusted advisor that will, be transparent, tell you what you need to know, but partner with you.
Mhm.
So my platform has always been about educating women in this space, being that trusted advisor, to really say this is what you need. It's I'm a fiduciary, so everything is in my client's best interest. It's not that I'm just saying, you don't need to know this. Let me do everything about do it for you. It's this is why you're doing this. This is why you have these certain things, and so you're educated and you know why certain strategies are in place in your overall plan.
Mhm.
That's what a trusted advisor does. It's not just kind of dictating, "Oh, I'll take care of it. Don't worry." They'll pat you on the shoulder,
Right,
or don't worry, sweat your pretty head about it. It'll be
right.
taken care of. It'll be all good with that. And that's not where we want to be as women, and with our own money and making our
Mhm.
financial decisions. We want to make sure we partner with somebody that we can trust, and that will kind of give us the good, the bad, and the ugly
Mhm.
on the
Right.
situation, versus kind of sugarcoating it, or just keeping you so in the dark that you're not being transparent, that you don't know what's going on with, you're probably just as confused about your finances if you go to somebody who's just taking it and handling it, and not being getting you involved in the process.
Mhm. Well, I just wanted to point that out, that I really appreciate these years that you've been um,
Mhm.
talking to our members and helping them and proving that you are trusted, because that's really what we need. So not only do I want to thank you for the great conversation tonight, but overall for the passion that you bring to helping women with their finances. It's such an
Yeah,
important thing.
yeah. Thank you very much. And yeah, I definitely enjoyed our call. And I know, it's been so close to the holidays that we were kind of debating whether to do it or not. But
Mhm.
it's an important conversation any point time of the year. So I wanted to make sure, and I know a lot of people will probably listen to the replay as well. But it's
Right.
something to kind of kick off your new year with as well, to start thinking about it, because I know a lot of women will are in the situation that maybe next year or the year after, or sometime soon, they may be in a situation where they're planning for their retirement. So I think what we talked about tonight will really give them a good framework on where to go.
Exactly. And in a second here, I will tell people how to reach you if they
Mhm.
have any questions after
Yeah.
the call. Before that, I'm just going to say that I look forward to our next discussion, which, if we keep to our normal
Yeah.
schedule, the fourth Thursday of the month would be
Yes.
January 27th of
Mhm.
2022. How can we start remembering to write 2022 when we write checks,
I
especially
know it's always one of those things after
right?
the calendar flips over. So that now we're in 2022. I did see something funny the other day, and about it was a meme that was going around. It said it's like the time where you realize that 2022 is also 2022 TOO. That we don't want to re-experience 2020 at all costs, but 2022, I thought that was pretty funny.
That is funny. I thank you for sharing that. I'm going to share that with other people. I really enjoy that. Is there anything
Yeah.
else that you want to say before we wrap up this call?
No, I really just want to emphasize, kind of this importance of retirement planning, especially as it relates to women. Ladies, it's just not a do-it-yourself project. I really stress in the point number 10, which is seek help. If not from me and getting some answers to your questions, but seek guidance from
Mhm.
somebody that you do trust, and that is a professional that's a fiduciary that will be working in your best interest as you plan for your retirement, because you want to make sure it's done. Get that proper GPS roadmap, whatever you want to call it, framework in place so you can feel confident about your retirement.
Could you remind people what fiduciary means? Because I think it's one of those
Yeah.
words we hear, but not everybody knows.
Exactly. And what that means is really a person, a financial advisor. So a lot of people that kind of hold themselves out as financial advisors, but some of them are insurance people, some of them are just stockbrokers who just kind of work on their whether they need to sell to you.
Mhm.
A fiduciary always works in your best interest, whatever needs to be done, either products or services to bring those to you, but always working on your behalf versus I need to sell this
Mhm.
today or I need to sell you this because I will make more money or whatever the
Right.
case may be. That's why you want to look for a trusted advisor that is also a fiduciary, that you know that um, they're not they have your best interest and there's no conflict of interest in there.
Excellent. Well, not only do I want to thank you, Pam, but I want to thank everyone who's been listening, joining us for this call. As Pam said, it's very close to Christmas, very close to the end of the year, but a hugely important topic. If you heard some of this but you didn't have everything understood, if you have questions after the call, you can feel free to email Pam at Pamela@jacksonsams.com. That's
Mhm.
JACKSONSAMS.com. Or you can go to our website, www.jacksonsams.com. And if you'd like to know more about the National Association of Baby Born Women, check out our website, www.nabbw.com. We have a forum at Boomer Women Speak, which has really been replaced for the forum
Yeah.
part of it by Facebook, but there is
Uh-huh.
some evergreen content that's also in the forum that's worth looking at. And then, of course, we have a Facebook account at facebook.com/NABBW, and that is where I try to post information that relates to things that I come up with after our calls that relate to things that we've discussed. So it's
Mhm.
a way to keep up to date on anything that has changed in things that are
Yeah.
financial or other things that I think that we as baby boomer women are interested in.
Yeah,
So
and occasionally I'll send you an article to share as
she
well
does.
because
She
I
has some excellent
I
articles that we
send
share
a
there.
lot of different things as well. But I also wanted to you mention my website for the new year. I mean, probably within the next week or so, I will be having a refresh or upgrade on my website. So look out for more interesting content, more I guess more pizzazz on the
Okay.
more interactive part of my website as well. So look out for updates on the website probably within the next week, definitely by the beginning of the year. I
All
think you
right.
will be pleased.
I will be checking it out.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Pam. Thank you to our audience. And unless anybody else is listening who has any questions, I think that we've gone past our allotted hour and we should probably end the call.
Yes, yes. And happy holidays to you, Anne, and to all of our listeners out there. And definitely for a happy and prosperous new year. Looking forward to year number 11 on working with you again as
Oh,
our continued relationship.
that is awesome. I'm so excited that we're about to start year number 11, Pam. And happy
Yes.
holidays to you and your family.
All right. Take care.
All
Bye,
right.
guys.
Good night.